और आगे बढ़ेंगे, सीधा सदन का रुख कर लेते हैं, जहां पर वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण इकोनॉमिक सर्वे पेश कर रही हैं। इकोनॉमिक सर्वे आधार होगा कल पेश होने वाले बजट का, और वित्त मंत्री के जरिए वो प्रारूप सामने एक तरीके से रखा जा रहा है। मुख्य आर्थिक सलाहकार इस वक्त बोल रहे हैं, सुनेंगे।
Balance sheet stress later, face of a higher non-performing assets due to past forbearance, and then by the time we could repair, just want to leave one statistic with you. The non-financial private sector leverage ratio, debt to GDP, went up by 40 percentage points in the first decade, from 2000 to 2010. And from 2010 to 2018, it came down by 30 percentage points. And by 2018, that was kind of done, it had bottomed out. But before we could start expecting corporates to borrow and banks to lend, came the collapse of IL&FS and some housing finance companies. And by the time we got a grip on that problem, came the pandemic. That lasted 2 years. And then 2022, we had the commodity price shock and synchronized monetary policy tightening after a very long time in the developed world. So it's a case of balance sheet stress followed by successive one-off exogenous or external shocks that have basically prevented the impact of economic reforms pursued by the government on economic growth. We would have seen the results already, but for these successive one-off shocks on the back of a fairly large credit boom that turned into a bust. The reforms of the last 8 years, which I just now mentioned to you, basically spans multiple dimensions. It is not purely about economic reforms for higher growth. It is also about inclusive growth, financial inclusion, banking cleanup, the creation of the digital public infrastructure, which I think I'm going to talk about a bit later as well, and contribution to healthy India, ease of living, and continuing on to the next slide, physical infrastructure creation, facilitating investments, transparent taxes and tax administration, ease of doing business, and farmers' welfare. So broadly speaking, about 10 areas we have covered here. These reforms were happening even as the banking cleanup was going on. And this episode between 2014 and 2022 has a lot of parallel to what happened between 98 and 2002 as well. Then, as now, the banking system was coming out of an NPA crisis, and there were sanctions on India after the nuclear device was tested in Pokhran in 98, and deleveraging was getting on in the banking and corporate sector. There were 2 successive droughts. The technology boom ended, internet boom ended in 1999-2000, and the US recession followed, 9/11 happened. But amidst all these shocks, interest rates were deregulated, privatization was pursued vigorously, and the first foundations of the insolvency and bankruptcy regime was laid with the asset recovery mechanisms. The FRBM Act was introduced, and today's digital infrastructure, which we talk about, the foundation for that was laid with telecom reforms in that era. But obviously, there is a lagged effect for these reforms to show through in the data because underlying conditions had to turn favorable. We talk of public digital infrastructure. Okay. I think it's not enough if I just look at the screen, right?
की सीधी तस्वीरें हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं, जो बता रहे हैं कि सरकार की तरफ से क्या उद्देश्य रहा, कैसे उस उद्देश्य को हासिल किया गया। मुख्य आर्थिक सलाहकार प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस करते हुए जानकारी दे रहे थे। कल खास दिन है, वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण मोदी सरकार के दूसरे कार्यकाल का आखिरी बजट पेश करने वाली हैं।